Hey, happy August 2nd. It's Friday. It's PFT PM. No big reveal today. No Chris Sims going to slide in with that giant Max Headroom cranium of his. And it's amazing how few of you remember the great and powerful Max Headroom. I guess Chris's video really looked Max Headroom-ish yesterday because lights were going on and off and he was freezing up. And he's got really good internet, so he says. Apparently something was wrong yesterday because he was very, very glitchy. We fought through it. It was fun to talk to him. We'll be doing it again a couple of times next week, and we are only 10 days away from the somewhat triumphant return of PFT Live, 7 a.m. Eastern, Peacock, Sirius XM 85, Sky Sports whenever they choose to play it, and podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. So until then, we continue to do PFT PM. 5 for 5. I think this is the second straight week of 5 for 5. I'm not sure. I can't really remember anything these days, but I have managed to remember what I want to talk about today, in part because I have my little cheat sheet. I just got some notes on my phone. And I want to start with the fact that football is back. Hooray. And the Hall of Fame game was actually fun to watch last night. I sensed the excitement of the players, the coaches. CJ Stroud fired up when Cam Akers ripped off a nice little, I think it was a little catch and run, rumbled down the field. They got some great depth behind Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce to get Cam Akers for $1.175 million. Many thought he was going to end up back in Minnesota. He's in Houston, and he could help, make a big play in a big moment to make a difference in a game that makes a difference between winning the division, being a wild card, or maybe being the 1 seed, who knows, in the AFC. But it was fun to watch. And it was interesting to see the first iteration of the dynamic kickoff. I didn't realize they were calling it the dynamic kickoff. I apparently didn't get the memo. And just because they're trying to force that verbiage onto us, apparently, I won't be calling it the dynamic kickoff. It's just the kickoff. It's the kickoff. And the new kickoff was interesting. Now, the one thing I noticed, 2 things. First of all, kind of hard to make a block when you're only 5 yards apart, because that gives, like if you're right on the line of scrimmage, you've got the opportunity to lock up with the guy across from you. When you've got 5 yards apart, they can get around you and they collapse it. And there wasn't that. Now, that doesn't mean it won't happen, but at least for the first game, there wasn't that long run where the guy just slips through a crease and he's gone. We might see it happen when Tyreek Hill is returning kicks, if that occurs, or other great return specialists, because you just get through one hole and you are gone. But what I noticed was this. For a lot of the returns, the basic run-of-the-mill return, you catch the ball in the landing zone between the 0 and the 20, and you're about 3 strides away from the 25. And the first few kick returns were 27, 26. Guy fell down and still got to the 26. And it reinforces the idea that some of these teams are going to realize if we're going to be between the 25 and the 30 anyway, for the standard run-of-the-mill average random kick return, let's just give them the 30 and take the touchdown off the table. We'll give you a couple of extra yards and we'll avoid a backbreaker or something that will breathe life into a team that is otherwise on the ropes. That huge momentum swing that comes from a kickoff return for a touchdown, we won't have that. You just start at the 30 and we'll trust our defense. And we're talking about, and I know the analytics crowd would say, well, the difference between the 30 and the 27, when you multiply it by that and include pi. And I know over time it's probably better to start on the 27 and the 30, but you got to factor in the possibility that getting to the 27 entails the risk of a long touchdown. So and Ronnie Harrison texted me during the game and said, it looks like it's physical. It looks fun. And it does. And it just looked fun last night. It was great to have football back, and it was fun to watch. And guys were playing hard because these are the guys that are trying to win roster spots. They're trying to impress the coaches. And I didn't see any Guardian caps last night. None. Which, who knows what will happen for the rest of the preseason? Who knows what will happen in the regular season? Will it be something that maybe a guy wears it when he's coming back from a concussion? I don't know. But we saw 0 Guardian caps last night, even though players this year are allowed to wear them. And you've had some guys openly talking about possibly doing so, like Geno Smith, the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. So it was fun to watch. And then the storms came. We had the same Doppler radar image on ESPN and ABC like 50 times. And I knew, didn't you know what was going to happen? The moment they suspended play, they're not coming back. They're not finishing the game. But they're not going to call it until 5 minutes to 11 because ESPN and ABC will simulcasting the game. What's ABC going to put on the air between them pulling the plug and the top of the hour when they do the local newscast? So it's obvious. It's obvious they're going to milk this cow all the way until 11 o'clock. And you know what the thing is? I sat there and watched it. What else am I going to do? What else is on? So they were never, ever going to continue that game. But they weren't going to call it until 5 to 11 as a favor to their friends at ABC because ABC didn't have anything else to put on the air. I mean, I guess they could have dusted off, an old episode of Happy Days. Wouldn't that have been great? Put on an old Happy Days on ABC for the last half hour before the start of the late local news. So it was fun, and then it was done. And next week, we will be into preseason on a more widespread basis. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We get a couple of weeks of that. And then we have the final week of the preseason. Then there's a down week, and then it goes. And how it goes in Dallas remains to be seen. The Dak Prescott situation. Chris and I talked about this yesterday. And after we recorded PFT PM, I talked to some people in the know. Dak Prescott is talking more and more like somebody who may end up playing elsewhere. And what's kind of going on with the Cowboys and Dak Prescott is a game of chicken. The Cowboys are willing to pay a certain amount now. Dak wants more, obviously. I mean, I know. A deal would be done if that wasn't the case. It's not like the Cowboys are saying, we won't pay you anything. The Cowboys are willing to pay a certain amount. Dak wants more. If that wasn't the case, deal would be done. The question becomes, how high will the Cowboys go before week 1? And will Dak say yes to it? The Cowboys, I think, want to hedge their bets a little bit. And one of the issues, and remember, we get so caught up in the average per year, new money on a contract extension. That's like the default currency for valuing contracts, and we don't look into other things. Length of the contract is an issue. We saw that last week. Both Jordan Love and Tua Tagovailoa managing to finagle 4-year extensions, not 5-year extensions. They're back on the market before they turn 31 in theory. That was a huge win for the players. It never shows up in the post on social media or the headline because the headline is the APY. Because I think at a certain level, number one, members of the media want to pander to the agents who give them their information. And number two, there's a certain amount of pot stirring because the fans get riled up at how much players are making. Oh, he's not worth that. He's not worth that. Well, yes, he is, or he wouldn't be getting it. We're all worth whatever we get. And Jordan Love must be worth $55 million a year in new money, and Tua must be worth $53.1 because they both got it. The point is, one of the factors that we're looking at, the escape hatch. When can the team get out? And my understanding is the Cowboys are trying to engineer an off-ramp, an exit hatch, an escape hatch. I got to be consistent with my term here. I don't want to be like others who are kind of struggling for a good nickname. Escape hatch. Escape hatch. The Cowboys want one sooner than later. In the event that they recognize they're just not getting any farther with Dak Prescott, another opportunity comes along that maybe could be the answer, or he gets banged up, he starts to regress. They don't want to make a commitment that will be firm 3, 4, 5 years. I think they're looking for an off-ramp after 2 years, potentially. They don't have to take it, but potentially. I don't know that it's 2 years. I'm just telling you that one of the issues is when will the Cowboys be able to get out of a longer-term relationship with Dak Prescott? That's a factor here. That's my understanding. But dollars continue to be a big issue. And the risk they're taking is, let's say he has a big year. Let's say they get to the NFC Championship game, God forbid, first time since 1995. You know, as you're playing deeper into January, other teams are plotting their free agency moves, and they're saying, hey, maybe we make a run at Dak Prescott. Maybe we pay him $70 million a year. And I think the Cowboys, and I don't like betting against your player. I just don't like it. If you're inclined to bet against your player, then just go ahead and move on from him. But the Cowboys are kind of betting against that. Like, you know, we'll take our chances that he's going to go out and have a big year and maybe could walk away and make far more from someone else than we want to pay. We're willing to take that good problem to have if that means we get to the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl. But I feel like they're betting the under, because just go ahead and get the deal done. Let's give him the security. Let's give ourselves the certainty, and let's go see if we can get to a level we haven't reached in 29 years. But that's part of it. So it's escape hatch and it's hedging, because the thinking is if they let this season play out, the end result will be that maybe they can get the deal on better terms than even they could get it now. That's one of the reasons for doing it now, because maybe the deal gets a lot worse for you later. I feel like they're hedging that maybe the deal won't get worse with one more year of performance. And maybe the perception will dip enough that another team won't blow the Cowboys out of the water when it comes to what they would offer. And I still think at the end of the day, what the Cowboys want to do is let Dak see what else is out there, compare it to what the Cowboys are willing to pay, and come to the conclusion that the inherent value of being starting quarterback for the Cowboys makes up for the difference between whatever Dallas will pay and what someone else will pay. Unless he just wants to prove a point, unless he just decides he's done with this crap. He's done dealing with Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones. He's done with the Cowboys. He wants a fresh start. When he talks about it now, he's kind of come to terms with it. You know, a lot of these interviews and press conferences feel like those little snippets from The Office. And this was one of the, I think, brilliant aspects of that show. They would have folks quickly adjust to whatever bad news it was that came their way. And then it would change, and they would change. Like, we deal with whatever the hand is we've been dealt. And I feel like Dak realizes he's about to be dealt a ticket out of Dallas, and he's come to terms with the reality that that might happen. Now, if the Cowboys would sign him to a new contract, then all of a sudden everything he'd be saying is, I was never going to leave. But he understands where this could lead. And I admire the fact that he has always been willing to take a stand to enhance his own personal earnings, to get the most out of football that he can, because you give everything you have, you should get everything you can, because you only have limited chances to do so as a player in the National Football League. So we'll see how that plays out. But remember, escape hatch and Cowboys possibly hedging against Dak not having a big year. Okay, next topic. And let me give you the full explanation as to how this happens, because I didn't go out looking for this. I happened to notice the other day that the new rule book was out. And every year at about this time, the NFL publishes, and I love the transparency, the full rule book for anybody who wants to look at it. And I think the joke's on all of us, because the NFL knows most of us are too lazy to look at it. So, hey, sure, we'll give you full transparency. Here's a document that we know most of you don't care to look at, because it takes more than 10 seconds to begin to digest it. So what I always do when the rule book comes out, I hate to give away the secret sauce to any of the competitors, but this isn't a real secret. Folks, what are you doing? What are you doing out there? We have this snacking mentality in journalism nowadays, the AI headlines, the misleading clickbait that take 5 minutes to write. Let's do some real work. Let's put our teeth into the rule book. Let's see what's in it. Let's see what's different. And the NFL makes it easy because all the new stuff is in red. So it's not like you have to compare last year to this year and say, I see a difference here. No, all you have to do is scroll through the new rule book, and all the changes are in red. And in some aspects of the rule book, there's a lot of red, like with the kickoff. But there are other little subtle things that will pop up. The first thing I noticed, by the way, and we haven't written about this yet at PFT, they finally codified the previously unwritten rule about the whole heel toe, foot down, not down. You know, the rule that if you're catching the ball on the sideline, if you do the toe tap and then step out of bounds, it's a catch. But if you do the toes facing inward, heels come down on the line, you're out of bounds. I remember hearing that at one of these seminars that we do before the start of the season with NBC 10, 12, 13 years ago. It's like, I didn't know that. And it comes up from time to time. And they finally put in writing that rule. It wasn't in writing. And that's one of the big problems I always have. We have the rules, and then we have the way they're applied. And sometimes there's a little bit of a conflict. Now they've codified this rule about the foot, the continuous motion, and it's okay if you get the toes in, but if your foot's in the process of coming down, if it finishes on the white line, you're out of bounds. So that was the first thing I saw. Next thing that hit my radar screen, there was a proposal in the offseason to make the rules for intentional grounding the same for inside the pocket as they are outside the pocket. So basically, if you're in the pocket, the walls are collapsing, all you have to do is throw the ball past the line of scrimmage, and it's not intentional grounding. Just get the ball to the line of scrimmage. It's not intentional grounding in the pocket or out of the pocket. That was a proposal that didn't go anywhere. But what they did, and I'd love to know, and I got to find out at some point, I need to remember to do this. What's the procedure for these little tweaks? These little things that maybe weren't articulated as an official rule change, voted on by the owners, and then published to the media, because we weren't told that the rules were revised to redefine being out of the pocket to include any part of the body or the ball being out of the pocket. So what they weren't able to do directly, they kind of did indirectly. Because now all you have to do as a quarterback is get yourself in a position where any part of you, big long arms, get it out of the pocket and throw it. Now you have to be able to muscle it past the line of scrimmage or it's still grounding. But a little pivot to the left or right, a quick step, quarterbacks will practice that. They'll have that moment, get rid of the ball, boom, get part of my body out of the pocket and fire it past the line of scrimmage out of bounds. And it's not intentional grounding. So it's a very subtle, but I think significant change to the rules, where it makes it easier for the officials to keep the flag in the pocket, not call intentional grounding, and give the quarterbacks a way to take the heat out of the hot kitchen without getting hit. They don't want the quarterbacks to get hit. So they don't want the quarterback to say, I'm going to risk intentional grounding here. I'm going to hold on to the ball and then get hit and get injured. Give them a way to get rid of the ball. So even though the rule wasn't changed to let a quarterback inside the pocket, throw it past the line of scrimmage, out of bounds, or wherever there's no receiver, and avoid intentional grounding, if any part of your body or the ball are out of the pocket, you can do that and you won't be called for intentional grounding. The next thing I noticed relates to another rule that from time to time is under assault. Remember the report last year during the season, Roger Goodell hates the tush push and he's going to have it outlawed. Well, I don't know that that was true, but if it was true, it didn't come to fruition because the quarterback push play, as perfected by the Philadelphia Eagles, continues to be permissible. However, there's a little language slipped into the rule book that addresses a couple of concerns that have been raised by other teams. Two concerns. One, the crowding around the quarterback by other players who aren't on the line but aren't in the backfield. The rule now limits each team to one player in no man's land. One player who isn't on the line of scrimmage or in the backfield, and that's the guy taking the snap. Must be a player with an eligible number or somebody who is properly reported. More on that in a second. But you can't have the two sidecars right there, ready to push. You got to still be in the backfield. You just run up and push, but still, it avoids that crowding that we've seen around the quarterback. You can't have other players who are in that same no man's land where a quarterback lines up to take a snap. So it changes, doesn't eliminate, but changes one of the techniques for implementing the quarterback push play. As it relates to this requirement that the one player who's in no man's land has to have an eligible number or report in advance as eligible, that prevents a situation where, for example, one of the linemen would slip under center to take the snap in the push play, get the first down, and then go back to playing on the line. The argument that teams made in the past is because you're not going into the backfield or lining up in an eligible position, you don't have to report ahead of time, and you're not subject to the reporting rules, which go like this. If you report as eligible with an ineligible number, you've got to continue to play an eligible position until you leave the game for at least a play. So if you take the snap, you report as you do the Dan Skipper, report as eligible, You're acknowledged properly as being eligible. You take the snap, you can't go straight to the line. You have to continue to be in eligible positions until you come out of the game. That's all gone now. So you can't have a lineman kind of slip under center, take a quick snap, get the first down, get pushed, have the physics on their side, big lineman, big ball carrier, guys behind shoving. You can't do that without reporting, and you can't do that without leaving unless you're going to continue to line up in an eligible position continuously until you leave the game. So those are the tweaks that have been made to the quarterback push play. It still survives, but it's been undermined a bit. This is the way they strike the balance when they get complaints from teams about how aggressively other teams are applying the rules on the books. And that leads to the last one. And this one is fascinating to me. There's language in the new rule book, and I want to make sure I get the quote right. As it relates to false starts and illegal formations. Hang on, bear with me. They added this language. Any eligible backfield player who changes his stance does not have to come to a complete stop prior to the snap, as long as his actions are not abrupt, which would be a false start, or forward, which would be illegal motion. Now, we already knew that. That didn't need to be added to the rule book. It doesn't really change the rules. I saw that, though, and it's like, hey, and here's what I'm not looking for this. I'm spotting the changes. I'm looking for the red language in the new rule book. And if I have a question, I have people that I can confer with who are within the, structure of the league who can explain to me why this was put in there. So that's what I did. Why is this in there? And the answer was Miami, San Francisco, and the Rams. This cheat motion, speed motion that's been perfected by those teams and other teams either thinking about doing it themselves or complaining about how they do it. And this is aimed at making sure that everybody understands you can do this, but if it's too abrupt, it's a false start. And if you're going forward at the snap, it's illegal motion. Doesn't really change the rules, but they added that language because we saw it last year. I mean, if you watch the games, you see this, and it's not like the full-blown CFL, guys 10 yards behind the line of scrimmage and he's sprinting to the line. But we see like Tyreek Hill has perfected cutting upfield just before the snap. Moving so quickly and abruptly that it basically makes the defense pee a little bit. They don't know what to do. Oh my God. And that gives you an edge. That takes the concept of motion and it puts it on hyperdrive. That's what these teams have done. And I saw there was an item in The Athletic from Jordan Rodriguez. Yesterday, Sean Hockley, one of the referees, was at Rams camp. And he said, this doesn't change anything about how we officiate it. Well, it should, because the reason I believe the language was added, the league acknowledges that the referees aren't calling it when it happens. And this is the product of the complaints that get made. Hey, and I was on with Joe Rose, who does radio analysis for the Dolphins. He said last year when the Dolphins were doing this, other teams were going to the officials before the game saying they are cheating here. Their guys are going forward at the snap. They're moving too abruptly. Bill Belichick, then the Patriots coach, one of the ones who complained, according to Joe Rose. So this is the way to kind of placate everyone and make sure everyone understands these are the rules. So the rules don't change per se, but that language wasn't put in there just because they're looking to add words to the rule book. They're not trying to pad the word count like when, we had to do a 300-word essay in school, and it was a very, 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 very cold day. So I just think it's funny that the people who have failed to properly enforce the rules on the books are saying, it doesn't change anything. You failed to apply the rules. You failed to throw the flags. This is directed at you, Sean Hockley, and your peers. Your guys have failed to shut down these plays when it's clearly happening. Now the rules are there to tell you, shut down this play. No, the rule hasn't changed, but they want you to apply the rules more aggressively than you have. And you've got Sean McVay, who's benefited from it, saying, nothing's really changed. Sean, it has, because you no longer can have your guy time it perfectly and cut up field just before the ball snapped. And it all happens. And think about it. It's all happening in real time. There's a lot going on. So you're the official. You see the guy cut. By the time your brain sends the message to your hand to throw the flag out, it's too late. The moment's passed. The play's started. So this is one of those where they're kind of gaming the system a little bit. It reminds me of what the Legion of Boom did 10, 12 years ago, where they're just going to hold the receiver every play, and they're going to dare the officials to call it. They're not going to shut the game down by throwing a flag for 5 yards and an automatic first down every single play. So the teams that use cheat motion have been manipulating the rules on the books to their favor. This addition is there to send a message to the officials, throw the flag. And it's there to send a message to the teams, we're going to throw the flag if you keep doing the abrupt motion and the heading forward to the line of scrimmage, split second before the snap, because that's what makes it so effective. That's why it's effective, because they are doing it abruptly and they are turning upfield just before the snap. You know, it reminds me of what we see from the tackles a lot of times. Lane Johnson is the master of this. That split second, you see the foot go back and he's getting into his pass block set. Now, I think the officials look the other way on that because they're trying to keep the quarterbacks from getting killed. And the defensive linemen, the pass rushers, generally are far better right now than the offensive linemen. So let's go ahead and look the other way on that. But it's the same idea. Things that happen a split second before the snap, it short circuits the brain of the person who's supposed to be throwing the flag, because by the time you get your hand on the flag, you're going to shut down the play when the play has already matured to the point you're going to have contact. And like, why are we shutting down the play when guys are already banging into each other and the ball carrier's already been tackled? Like, what's the point? So I think the idea is they want the officials to throw the flag. And I think in a perfect world, they want the teams to just knock it off. Whether or not that happens remains to be seen. All right. Last topic. Save the best for last. And I got a lot of questions that we've harvested that may end up being duplicative. I'm going to try not to plow the same ground twice here. But last night, what a sense of timing for Judge Philip Gutierrez. Within 45 minutes before kickoff of the Hall of Fame game to start the 105th season of the National Football League, with the swoop of a pen, Judge Gutierrez threw out the entirety of the Sunday ticket class action antitrust verdict of $4.7 billion, which, if it had become a judgment, would have automatically tripled to $14.1 billion. Incredible development. Unexpected. One day after the hearing. And, look, I'll admit, I was skeptical of the reporting from the hearing about the judge saying the jury didn't follow his instructions, because I said, look, if that's accurate, rule from the bench. Well, he ruled one day later. And he had a 16-page written opinion ready to go, which means he knew what he was going to do going into that hearing. He knew damn well. And maybe he's got a little sense of the dramatic. I'm going to drop this thing right before the start of the Hall of Fame game. I could say a lot about it, and I will say a lot about it. I'm just going to pick my spots here, and I'm going to try to be economical because there's a lot of different ways to look at this. First of all, it's a huge win for the NFL. And there was a lot of concern spreading throughout the league about what this would mean if every team had to come up with $440 million. These owners aren't just going to take it out of their pockets. It's going to come out of other pockets. There was a concern already that they were going to try to foist some of this onto the players through the salary cap. But even if they didn't, the willingness of teams to spend cash would have diminished in the year they had to spend the $440 million. For example, Jordan Love getting $79 million in cash this year. That wouldn't happen in the year that the Packers would have had to come up with $440 million. So there would have been an impact. Teams would have been spending less overall. There's a cap and there's a floor. Some teams congregate at the cap. We would have seen a lot of teams congregate at the floor until they get their $440 million back. They're never going to pay it out of their own pockets. And this isn't an indictment of the NFL's owners. This is just an observation about business. You get hit hard, you look for ways to spread it around within your current broader structure. Less money for the players, less money for the coaches. Maybe we're going to lay some people off. We're going to spend less on facilities. It would have had a trickle-down effect. they talk about trickle-down economics where if you reduce the taxes, then that has a trickle-down effect to everybody else. It's more money for everybody else. Well, I don't know how true that is, but I'll take it if it means lower taxes. But the opposite is definitely true. If you dump a big pile of shit on the owners financially, pardon me, Gary, sorry, you got to take that out, but they're going to pass it downhill. The shit flows downhill. The reduced taxes might not, but the expenses will. So it's good for the NFL and everyone connected to it directly that this goes away. It's bad for the consumers, though, because the people who've been overcharged for Sunday Ticket since its inception in 1994 are going to get nothing. And I say that because, and let's understand exactly what the judge did. The judge didn't find that the jury incorrectly ruled it was an antitrust violation. He specifically said there was more than enough evidence to support the finding that the NFL violated the antitrust laws, given the way it constructed and distributed and priced the Sunday Ticket package, period. So this is the thing that the NFL will never put in a statement. A jury has found that Sunday Ticket, as currently engineered and operated, violates federal antitrust laws. Period. Period. The problem was that the judge ultimately decided that the expert witnesses presented by the plaintiffs to prove the damages weren't sufficiently reliable. Now, the judge is the gatekeeper for determining what expert testimony is and isn't allowed. And the thing that kind of has me twisted in knots is he allowed these folks to testify. And you know in advance what they're going to say. This is part of the discovery process, the expert witness disclosure process. You know what's going to be said. And the other side gets a chance to take a lengthy deposition of the expert. They see his report. They're able to pick it apart. And then they file a motion ahead of time to exclude that witness as an expert. And that's where the judge operates as the gatekeeper to say, I'm sorry, but this person's opinions aren't sufficiently reliable. I'm exercising my prerogative as the gatekeeper for the expert witness function to say he or she can't testify. In this case, the judge let them testify. They said exactly what they were expected to say. And then after the fact, the judge says, they're not reliable. I changed my mind. What the hell is that? What is that? It's almost like the judge, and let's take a step back. The case originally was thrown out by the judge originally assigned to the case. She has since deceased. It's been 9 years. She threw the case out. The appeals court resurrected the case and sent it back. Judge Gutierrez, who was appointed to the court by George W. Bush, and we've talked about this before, judges who are picked by Republican presidents have a pro-business bias. Judges who are picked by Democratic presidents have a pro-consumer bias. That's just the way it is. So it falls back to Gutierrez. Gutierrez has concerns about the case, but I think he made the calculation, maybe the jury will save me here. Maybe I don't have to throw the case out. Maybe the jury comes back with a goose egg or a finding for the NFL, and I don't have to get my hands dirty. I don't have to be in a position where the appeals court may smack me down, just like the appeals court smacked down the prior ruling that the entire case was thrown out. I think that's the game he was playing. The problem is, it's a little easier to do it before there's 14.1 billion riding on it, because now you're going to have some people who are like, hey, what the hell? Why are you taking away? Why are you wasting? I mean, it was a waste of everyone's time and money. Like, if you knew there were issues with the expert witnesses, why in the hell didn't you just throw the case out then, instead of making everyone go through the motions of a 4-week trial, have the jurors tied up for all those days, all those expenses for the legal fees and the $1,000 plus per hour that some of the expert witnesses were charging to sit there and watch the case as it unfolds? Why are you wasting all that time and money when you know what you're going to do anyway? And judges will do that. Hey, let's see what the jury does. Maybe the jury gives me cover. That's what he was looking for. Maybe the jury's going to give me cover here. Oh, they didn't. Well, I got to do what I was going to do anyway. I was always inclined to throw out the case, and the jury's now forcing me to throw out the case. I think that's it in a nutshell. And again, I'll have more to say about it, but I've read most of the transcript. I got to the closing arguments and I figured, well, at this point, I should probably redirect my efforts, given that the product ultimately of the effective closing argument by the plaintiffs was overturned by the judge. And there's no new trial. The judge basically said, your expert witnesses are crap and you have nothing else. So even though the jury reasonably found that there was an antitrust violation, there's no damages. There's not even $1. There's nothing. There's no injury proven to the class. So even though the USFL was able to get $1, which unlocked the ability to get attorney's fees on the back end, where you put in a bill for all the time you spent on the case, this is zero. This is nothing. The plaintiff's lawyers get nothing. They're out of pocket whatever they spent on getting the case ready, depositions, travel, expert witnesses. That money's gone and it's never coming back. This is one of the reasons why I defend contingent fees, because in a case like this, it never gets going if the named plaintiffs are the ones who have to pay that. The lawyers front all of that, and they get it all back later, and they justify the risk of losing that money by the reward that comes from the contingency fee. So if this stands, they're screwed. Now, obviously, they're going to appeal it. And we'll see what happens. There's a question about that, so I'll defer to that specific question. The one point that I think we need to remember, Sunday Ticket, as it's currently constructed, violates the antitrust laws. The jury's found it, and the judge, who was inclined to do the NFL a hell of a favor here, a $14.1 billion favor, that judge was not willing to say that the jury's verdict was incorrect. And the judge at one point during the trial said, you know, going into this case, I was thinking maybe the plaintiffs have the better of it. It's pretty simple. I'm a Seahawks fan in LA. I can't watch the Seahawks. I got to pay a lot of money to watch the Seahawks. There's something wrong with that. So what happens with that? That's my big question. The judge has found that the jury reasonably concluded that Sunday Ticket violates the antitrust laws. So what do? Why not issue an order that you can no longer band together, assign the exclusive rights to Sunday Ticket to one company, and then either directly or indirectly compel that company to charge so much that most of the fans will say, I'll just watch the games that are made available for free in my local market on CBS and Fox. The thing that the judge relied upon the most in throwing out the testimony, and this was Daniel Rasher, Dr. Daniel Rasher, this was his but-for world, because this is how it works. You prove that the defendants violated the antitrust laws in the real world. So how do you determine the financial loss? Well, we have to construct a world that would have existed but for the antitrust violation. And what Rasher tried to do is say, if you take away Sunday Ticket, the end result will be that all of the out-of-market games will be televised at no extra charge on a variety of networks that will pay for the rights to show this game, that game, that game, that game. So you would have basically, I think this is how it would look. CBS and Fox would have the rights to broadcast the home market games. Steelers in Pittsburgh, Jets, Giants in New York, Cowboys in Texas. And then the feeds, just like they currently go to YouTube, those feeds would end up on other networks for out of market. So if I'm in Pittsburgh, Steelers game is going to be on CBS or Fox, and then all the other games are going to be on other networks, and they're all going to be on at the same time. That was basically the model that Rasher put forward, like college football. All those games are on at any given time. And I don't think that that's conceptually all that hard to understand. See, the judge was either unwilling or unable to understand that that's a plausible alternate universe. And in that universe, the plaintiffs pay nothing as opposed to the money that they were paying for Sunday Ticket. So $7 billion was the number. If there had been no extra charge for Sunday Ticket, $7 billion is what the class would have avoided. Now, the judge didn't even get to the question of whether or not the $4.7 billion verdict was impermissible. He eventually said, even if I didn't throw out the case because the expert witnesses are unreliable, the jury still came up with its own number. But that's a fallback that doesn't matter at that point. The threshold argument is, I threw this thing out because the expert witnesses are unreliable, because he refused to understand or accept Dr. Rasher's but-for analysis, even though he knew before the case that's what it was going to be. That's what should irritate a lot of people here. You knew ahead of time. You could have avoided all of this if you just would have had the courage to say, I'm throwing the case out. But no, maybe the jury will give me cover. Oh, the jury didn't. Well, now I'll throw the case out instead. That's the end result. Regardless of all that, let's find out what the world would look like without the antitrust violation. Let's make the NFL get rid of Sunday Ticket. If a jury finds it's an antitrust violation, let's get rid of Sunday Ticket, and let's see what the NFL, working in concert with the various networks, will do. And I want to give you another example of why, and I've said this before. A judge will pick an ending point and work backward to justify it with the facts and the law. And this judge wanted to find against the plaintiffs, clearly. And you can see traces of the way that facts and law get twisted to fit the path working backward through the maze. For example, there's a footnote where he talks about how former CBS Sports chairman Sean McMahon has said that CBS wouldn't be interested in its current package in a world where all these other games were broadcast by other networks and they were going to have to share their feeds with other networks. Well, that's just purely speculative. That's self-serving. If you change reality, and CBS is faced with a choice between no football at all or a situation where CBS is sending crews to 6 or 7 different cities every week, and in the various markets, they're feeding that game, and the feeds go to all these other networks, like it currently goes to DirecTV and now YouTube for Sunday Ticket. If that's their choice, it doesn't matter what Sean McMahon says now. Oh, we wouldn't be interested. Well, first of all, you don't work there anymore. And second of all, how do you know you wouldn't be interested? So I think the easiest solution to all this, and apologies in advance to our friends at 345 Park Avenue, but the jury found that Sunday Ticket violates the antitrust laws. And I have a hard time accepting a world in which a jury has found, with the endorsement of the judge, that there was sufficient evidence to reach that finding, that an antitrust violation was committed, but it's impossible to attach damages to it because we can't envision the world without the antitrust violation. So the NFL just gets to keep committing the antitrust violation? That doesn't make any sense. So, look, there are millions of fans out there. This is from the NFL's own internal documents. Millions of fans who are underserved when it comes to their desire to have out-of-market games. 2 to 3 million have Sunday Ticket. The number of fans that would watch out-of-market games is anywhere from 35 million to 70 million. If every game that was being played on a Sunday afternoon was available somewhere on your basic cable, satellite, or streaming package, I think millions more would watch. I think at the end of the day, the NFL would make more money. They're just not willing to do it. Because once you let that genie out of the bottle, that genie's not going back in. That toothpaste not going. Whatever cliche we want to use, it's not going to be undone. And I think that's why they've resisted doing it. They've looked into doing it. They've had their new frontier analysis where they considered it. I don't think they want to do it. They don't want to risk the bird in the hand for the two in the bush because there's, in theory, a chance the bird in the hand flies away. Still, there's an antitrust violation that has been hiding in plain sight for 30 years, and there's no remedy for it. And for now, the NFL's gotten away with it. We'll see what happens on appeal. I saw an article today, and a lot of the media out there I'm sorry, very pro-NFL on this, suggesting that this outcome from yesterday will discourage others from following suit. I think that the fact that there was an antitrust violation found encourages others to take another swing at this. 2023, that's not part of the class action. 2024, that's not part of the class action. If the NFL doesn't change, there will be separate liability that continues to arise. And what needs to happen is somebody needs to find an expert witness that can come up with a but-for world that the judge will accept, both before trial and after the verdict comes in. And it's luck of the draw. I hate to make it that simple. But I would argue to you that if the judge presiding over the case had been appointed by Clinton or Obama or Biden, we'd have a different outcome. The $4.7 billion would have stood. President appointed by, or judge appointed by a Republican president, out it goes. It's just, listen, I did it for 19 years. That was always the number one concern in any case. If you were representing the defendant and your client was sued, who's the judge? If you were the plaintiff and you file the case, especially when it goes into one of these systems where it's luck of the draw, roll of the dice, rotation, who's the judge? What judge did we get? Oh, good. Oh, shit. One or the other. That's the way it worked. And it was driven by the political background, the manner in which the judge got on the court, what kind of law the judge practiced before the judge became a judge. That shapes your view of the world. And there's so many different ways to skin this cat. And I think there's more than enough evidence that a judge that wanted to find for the plaintiffs could have upheld that verdict. And there's also apparently more than enough evidence that a judge that wanted to throw it out could do it. But either way, this will get appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and then ultimately the Supreme Court. There's too much money at issue for that to not happen. All right, let's take a few of these questions. I've probably addressed a lot of it, but just in case, I'm going to scroll through these and make sure I answer a question or two once I find the tweet. All right. Jimmy Schnuggin. If the jury decided there were antitrust violations and the only error they made was the calculated damages, wouldn't the judge only make a ruling to modify damages and not throw out the entire verdict? You mentioned changing it to $1. Would the NFL be forced to change the pricing? Great question. I think I've covered a lot of this, but the judge didn't even get to the point where he reduced damages to $1. He found that the evidence submitted by the plaintiffs was so insufficient and unreliable that they have nothing. Hey, you've proven an antitrust violation. Congratulations. You have nothing to prove damages. You don't even get $1 for nominal damages. You get nothing. That's why we are where we are. Philander Whitlessy. I'm always worried that, like, if I read this phonetically or as it's spelled, it's something highly inappropriate, but I think we're okay. If the judge agrees correctly that the jury was able to determine the anti-competitive practices occurred, how can the judge then throw out the verdict, particularly on the grounds that the plaintiffs didn't prove a hypothetical? That's what this comes down to. The judge found that no reasonable jury would accept as reliable the evidence submitted by the plaintiff's experts. And the reality is, when you look at the transcript, like the fact witnesses, the non-experts, when they testify, they tell a story, they get asked questions. It's pretty easy for the average person to understand. And then the experts testify, and it really is, to use the judge's term from June 18, gobbledygook. It's impossible. How can somebody without any training in economics even begin to understand this stuff? And it usually cancels out, and then the jury just does what the jury is going to do. That's kind of how the game is played. One side puts on an expert that says one thing, the other side puts on an expert that says the other, and then the jury does what the jury does. In this case, the judge found that what the experts put on wasn't sufficiently reliable for any reasonable jury to give it credence. So that's how we got to where we were. Benny the Cab. Oh, this is a good one. With seemingly the entire NBC sports team covering the Olympics, do you feel left out or jealousy that you didn't get to go to Paris and cover it? Also, do you think you'll cover the next one with flag football being introduced? Let me just be very clear on this. They didn't hire me to cover the Olympics. They hired me to cover football, and camps are open. I would be missing out on 2 weeks of training camps and preseason if I was in Paris. And first of all, I have no desire to go to Paris, frankly, all due respect to Paris. If I was going to go across the ocean, I'd go to Italy. Second of all, Olympics aren't my thing. And great that they're kicking ass and they're doing well. And there's plenty of options for you to get your news and information and analysis about the Olympics, but we're not an Olympics website. NBC didn't bring us on board to be an Olympics website. So I don't want to be part of the Olympics coverage. And I'll tell you right now, I don't want to go to LA for entirely separate reasons that we've well established here in 2028. If I'm even still with NBC in 2028, I don't care about flag football. I know they're trying to force it. Everyone, like in the entire NFL ecosystem, is trying to force flag football down our gullets right now. I'm going to resist as long as I can. Because to me, sorry, NFL, flag football ain't football. So I'm not interested in flag football come 2028. Now, if a bunch of NFL players are playing, that's a different story. But still, when will the Olympics happen? I got to check the dates on that. I think they line up in a way that maybe does make it possible that players won't miss much camp, but we'll see. If I'm still working for NBC, and if they want me to do it, and if they give me hazard pay for being in LA for 2 weeks, I'll consider it. Miller, aka at Leroy Country. DirecTV was always giving away Sunday Ticket for free to get you to sign up or to not cancel. How does that factor into this? The people who got it for free weren't part of the class. The people in the class were the people who were paying for Sunday Ticket year in and year out. Because look, the people who got it for free, a lot of them didn't even watch it. These are the people who affirmatively paid the deliberately overcharged price to get them to buy Sunday Ticket. So the people who got it for free aren't part of this. No harm, no foul for any of them. Corey Joskowitz, given the league's propensity to not be proactive in addressing potential future problems, is it fair to say they won't adjust anything moving forward, even given the apparent problems their customers had with their approach to distribution of their content and the pricing? I think the NFL is going to keep doing exactly what it's doing until it's told to stop. Because I think the NFL knew back in 1994 when DirecTV and Sunday Ticket first became a thing. They knew it was an antitrust violation. For the first 8 years, the NFL exclusively controlled the pricing of it. It was an even more clear and obvious antitrust violation. And they've gotten away with it for 30 years. You know, whatever they ultimately have to pay, they will have squirreled away billions on the path toward whatever the reckoning may be. And they're still going to be ahead of the game. I think even with $14.1 billion, they're still ahead of the game. So they're going to keep doing what they do. We've reported they have no anticipation to make any changes. After last night's ruling, they're not going to be more inclined to change, that's for sure. But I think it's very simple. And I don't know where this stands, and I need to find out. Because there was the possibility of what they call injunctive relief, where the judge would say Sunday Ticket is disbanded. I don't know why the plaintiffs wouldn't insist on that. Now, here's the reality. You don't get a third of the value of Sunday Ticket being disbanded. For the plaintiffs' attorneys, the far more pressing economic concern is getting that $14.1 billion back. You get a third of $14.1 billion. You don't get a third of what the consumers get going forward. That's part of the problem here. But I think part of the obligation, the fiduciary responsibility the lawyers have to the class, and I'm a member of it. Anybody out there that's had DirecTV's Sunday Ticket from 2011 to 2022 is a member of it unless they opted out. Yeah. For those of us who have bought it or might be inclined to buy it in the future, let's break up this antitrust violation and let's make Sunday Ticket cheaper. Let's make the out-of-market package cheaper, more flexible, easier to get, easier to use, and cheaper to utilize than it has been for 30 years. Dean Ficini, putting aside the decision by the judge to overturn the judgment, has this lawsuit tarnished the reputation of the NFL and so give them cause to reconsider their future pricing strategies, or will it embolden them to raise prices even further? I'll say that it will cause them to do nothing because, frankly, and I still haven't gotten any pushback, and maybe I'm pushing the envelope to see if I do, but the case was horribly covered by the media. And there are plenty of people in the media who are in bed with the NFL. They either want to work for NFL media or their media operation has a relationship with the NFL that they put above the truth. And look, NBC has a relationship with the NFL, but I think in fairness to everyone, we need to call it like we see it. Sunday Ticket is an antitrust violation as it's currently constructed, but there wasn't enough coverage to shame the NFL into changing. The NFL is emboldened. We're going to keep doing what we do. And they keep saying, we have the best media rights package of any sport in the country, and all local games are available in the home market for free. There was a great example given by one of the expert witnesses called by the plaintiffs to rebut the expert testimony presented by the NFL. And it went something like this. If you split California into North and South, and if in the North, the most popular cereal is granola, and in the South, the most popular cereal is Cheerios. And in the South, Cheerios are really cheap, where it's the most popular cereal. but granola is really expensive. And in the North, granola is really cheap, where it's the most popular cereal, but Cheerios are really expensive. And there's a monopoly, a cartel, an antitrust violation in jacking up the price. The point is, you got people in Northern California that want Cheerios, and they got to pay way too much for the Cheerios, so they'll just settle for the granola. And you got people in the South that want granola, but it's way too expensive, so they'll just eat Cheerios. That's the reality here. The NFL loves to say we give fans more choices, but you have to pay too much for the choices because they want you to pay too much for the choices because they want you to just say, I'll have the Cheerios instead, even though I don't want the Cheerios. That's what it comes down to. But because the case was shoddily covered by the media at large, the NFL has not been shamed into changing. And that's the point I've been saying from the get-go. No matter what happens with this verdict, it has been laid bare. The NFL has taken advantage of its most avid fans and deliberately overcharged them in order to get the less avid fans to just watch whatever's on local TV for free. And they ignore one key fact here. And I probably got to wrap this up soon, but I was talking to somebody about this the other day. And I originally got Sunday Ticket in 1997 because I wanted to watch Vikings games, because I was maybe seeing 3 a year if I was lucky. A Monday night, a Sunday night, and maybe it would just fall just right. The Steelers are on a bye week and they backfill with Vikings, Bucks, whatever the case may be. In 1994, the year that DirecTV came out, my wife and I were renting a house, and I wasn't going to go get a satellite dish and pay all that money, and we just got married, and it's like, man, I really don't want to make the ask for this significant investment just so I can watch the Vikings games. You know what channel I would watch on Sundays in 1994? I didn't watch the Steelers game. I didn't watch the game that was on Fox at the time. That was the first year that Fox was available to broadcast NFL games. You know what channel I watched those days? And those of you of a certain vintage will know what I'm talking about. I watched CNN Headline News because CNN Headline News in 1994 was the only network that had the scores at the bottom of the screen. So in lieu of watching whatever Steelers game was on and waiting for maybe an update, maybe at halftime they'd tell me the score, I could watch CNN Headline News and I would see the score of the Vikings game every minute and a half because they'd scroll through them. So how many people just don't watch at all? That's the thing that I feel like the NFL has completely missed here. Your league isn't so popular that if there's somebody in Pittsburgh that wants to watch Dolphins games and they have to spend too much to watch Dolphins games, their fallback isn't, well, I'll just watch the Steelers game. That's not now maybe now because the scores are on the screen and they do have updates and maybe you do get more action and more information that way. But I think that this assumption that people who can't or won't pay for Sunday Ticket to watch the team out of market that they want to watch will just automatically watch whatever you give them. I don't know that that is as clear as the NFL, CBS, and Fox believe that it is. All right, a couple more. Burn Unit. You have said that appeal judges don't like to overturn rulings. Do you think this one will be an exception? Feels like the judge went rogue instead of the jury. I'm sorry if I misspoke in the past. Judges don't like to overturn jury verdicts, and judges don't like to be overturned by appeals courts. Appeals courts overturn judges all the time. They reverse and remand cases all the time. And here's what will happen. I don't know how many judges there are on the Ninth Circuit. There's probably more than 20. 3 of them will be randomly assigned the appeal of this case. The parties won't even know. The lawyers won't know until the day they show up, unless they've changed procedures. They do it differently in the Ninth Circuit. I know from my own experience, going to the Fourth Circuit in Richmond a couple of times when I was practicing. You walk through the door, you see the board that has the assignments, and there's the names of the judges. And loosely speaking, 2-1. Democrat versus Republican, Republican versus Democrat, appointed judge. That gives you an idea which way the wind's blowing. So we'll see what happens on the Ninth Circuit. And then beyond that, it goes to the Supreme Court. And there are other things that happen within the Ninth Circuit. There can be a request for rehearing. the rehearing en banc. We talked about that, or at least we wrote about that earlier this week with John Gruden. He's trying to get the full Nevada Supreme Court to tell him his case doesn't have to go to arbitration against the NFL. At some point, one side or the other here, maybe trying to get the whole Ninth Circuit to say whatever it is they want them to say. So, yeah, you can't even begin to anticipate or predict what's going to happen on appeal, because until you know who the three judges are. But I think there's enough there for at least two of the three judges to say to Philip Gutierrez, you got this wrong. It's luck of the draw at this point. All right, let's see what else we have. Here's the last one, and then we're going to call it a day. Jason Verne. In light of the judge taking tremendous power into his own hands and imposing his will, did you ever consider becoming a judge? Why or why not? As a person with a seemingly strong moral compass, it seems like something you would have enjoyed. I practiced law long enough to see how judges work and the way that they have to operate and the stress that they are under. And, you know, it's the kind of job where, and I saw the whole gamut, you can be as lazy as you want to be, or you can be as conscientious as you want to be. And I know how I'm wired. And I would have put way too much into it. And as Michael Scott once said, I no longer get paid by the hour, I get paid by the year. You're on a salary, and you don't get paid extra for busting your ass. You don't get paid extra for staying up late. You don't get paid extra for having an unrelenting desire to make sure that justice is done in each and every case. So, frankly, I know what judges make. Now, for some people, there's value in being a judge. I have power. I wear the black robe. Everybody stands up when I walk into the room. Everybody stands up when I leave the room. I don't really care about that shit. I'm at the end of the day, I want to do what I enjoy, and I want to be fairly compensated for it. And I think to do the job of a judge right at any level, you got to put in way more time and way more effort and way more give a shit than you get paid for. So just as an economic decision, it ain't worth it to me. All right, that's it. You know what? I don't get paid any extra to do these. So I've just kind of completely gutted my entire reasoning. But I enjoy this so much. I guess I get a little extra because the videos go into PFT and we get paid based on that and the YouTube. But at the end of the day, I could have been doing a lot more with the last 70 minutes for a lot more money than doing this. But I enjoy it. And I enjoy talking to you, and I enjoy that you enjoy it if you do indeed enjoy it. And if you don't, oh well. Oh well, you're not getting these 71 minutes of your life back. Thanks as always for some of your time. We have completed another 5 for 5 week of PFT PM. Tune in next week for more Max Headroom sightings, aka Chris Sims, and in only 10 days, PFT Live. Not so glorious return to Peacock, Sirius XM 85. And Sky Sports, and also wherever you get your podcast. Can't wait to do that. Enjoy the weekend. Stay safe. We will have constant updates all weekend long at ProFootballTalk.com. We'll see you back here again on Monday. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.